Stop trying to be humble. Industry gurus tell you humility is a leadership strength, but I'm telling you it's complete nonsense. It compromises your integrity and damages your ability to lead. Here's why and exactly what you should do instead. Let's dive in. The original meaning of the word humility should ring alarm bells from the outset. It meant lowness, small stature, insignificance, littleness of mind, literally on the ground, from humus, earth. It has that quality of self-abasement, which is not far off humiliation. And you don't need to be Stephen Fry to note the connection between the words humility and humiliation. And that's just for starters. Now, you might well argue that this kind of humility is not what leadership needs. And you'd be dead right. It needs a less extreme form. So immediately we use the word as a virtue, we're having to qualify it to keep it within the bounds of what we deem acceptable. And the problem there is that what you think is an acceptable degree of humility may not be for me. Virtues like clarity, integrity, and wisdom are unconditional, the more the better. Humility is not one of them, and therefore always subject to context and opinion. Charles Dickens gives us a wonderful caricature of toxic humility in the form of Uriah Heep, who repeatedly asserts his lowly status with his catchphrase, "ever so humble." He turns out to be a fraud and embezzler, humility turned criminal. A more recent example, who is by no means morally comparable to Uriah Heep, is the crying CEO Braden Wallace. You may remember he announced some layoffs on social media and posted a selfie of himself in tears with a mea culpa. The response was vitriolic, accusing him of self-serving, performative vulnerability and insensitivity. This is humility that curled toes and served no positive purpose that I can see. It makes empathetic pathetic. But none of us are immune to this kind of error of judgment, particularly when you value how you think something will land with someone else over being honest about how it lands with you. So is humility ever a good thing? Yes, but only relative to its opposite. Michael O'Leary, the CEO of Ryanair, has been accused many times of being anything but humble. The adjectives most associated with his demeanour are aggressive, controversial, and brash, the antithesis of humility. He is often described as arrogant, perhaps the best antonym of humble. So if we have a spectrum ranging between humility at one end and arrogance at the other, where do we place ourselves given the choice? Both extremes are undesirable. Extreme arrogance is the intense, unyielding, and often delusional belief in one's own superior importance, abilities, or knowledge, coupled with a complete, contemptuous disregard for others. This kind of behaviour is associated with psychopathy and clearly best avoided if at all possible. Extreme humility is just as dysfunctional, a profound, excessive downplaying of one's own worth, achievements, or abilities, going beyond healthy modesty to self-effacement, where an individual may deny their strengths or shy from success. These behaviours are symptomatic of several psychopathological conditions. So at one end of the spectrum, we have abuse of others, and at the other end, we have abuse of ourselves. Hopefully, by now, my case that humility is a bad thing, just as bad as arrogance, has been made. But what do we learn from this, and how do we put it into practice? Firstly, we should be clear that, unlike Uriah Heep, who went to prison, both Braden Wallace and Michael O'Leary are successful CEOs, at least in the generally accepted meaning of success. Neither am I suggesting that either are extreme to the point of displaying personality disorders, even though many commentators would. But it would seem reasonable to suggest that there may be a sweet spot between humility and arrogance, a Goldilocks zone, which makes for a more agreeable path to success than either CEO have trodden. Let's take another example from Lao Tzu, the author of the Tao Te Ching. In chapter 17, he writes, "A leader is best when people barely know he exists. When his work is done, his aim fulfilled, they will say, 'We did it ourselves.'" This quote is very revealing. It turns leadership on its head and transcends this particular behavioural spectrum altogether. Neither arrogance nor humility have any relevance in this dimension. They simply don't exist here. The truly successful leader has no need to display humility or arrogance, both of which reinforce his or her presence in the organization. Let's check out CEOs who embody this approach to leadership. Satya Nadella, praised for shifting Microsoft's culture, empowering teams to drive innovation, aligning with the idea that we did it ourselves. Indra Nooyi, former CEO of PepsiCo, focused on performance with purpose, empowering leaders to drive strategic shifts, demonstrating how broader aims are met through empowered teams. Reed Hastings, former CEO of Netflix, known for his radical transparency and freedom responsibility culture, empowering employees to take ownership, which again fits the "we did it ourselves" ethos. Arrogance is an ego trait, born of an overinflated sense of self-worth. Humility is just the opposite, an ego construct based on a lack of self-worth and self-respect. Both are created and supported by ego. As human beings, we all need an ego. We could not survive without one. But ego needs to serve us, not rule us, which is exactly what happens with both arrogance and humility. Yet there is another twist in the story that you may have picked up on. Frequently, humility is used by us to mitigate the appearance of arrogance. It tells us to play down assertiveness in order to create a more humble persona that can't be accused of any arrogance. This faux humility is no more than just another ego play calling the shots. Golda Meir, a former Prime Minister of Israel, saw straight through this and captured it elegantly with her famous quote, "Don't be so humble, you are not that great." So now to the solution. There is only one means of elevating yourself out of this and all the other dichotomies that the ego serves up for you, and that is self-awareness. Self-awareness, contrary to the received wisdom, is not simply knowing your psychological profile. Rather, it's having a clear perception of your thinking and feeling dynamics in the moment, now. How do we develop this kind of self-perception? Through an understanding of how our minds work and a persistent intent to observe it. There is a lot of unnecessary complexity in science's current understanding of the human mind, complicated by neuroscience. The salient points to become increasingly aware of in our pursuit of leadership are these. Firstly, that the mind is designed to think, and that any attempts to stop it will create more thinking. The second is that thought creates an attendant feeling, two sides of the same coin, which drives behavior and decisions. Thirdly, the only discretion we have is not psychological, it is metaphysical or existential, and concerns what we pay attention to. So our only need is to be aware of the thoughts we pay attention to and discriminate accordingly. That alone will determine the way we feel and consequently the actions we decide to take. That level of consciousness will help us respond to events and people rather than react to them. It flips the master-slave relationship and puts us in charge, not our egos. Meditation provides a powerful catalyst for many on this path and is also well worth exploring. Humility, then, is effectively an artifice that fools the less conscious mind into believing it is adopting an intrinsically noble virtue, whereas the truth is somewhat less glamorous. It is no more than an ego hijack. And the solution is never to move the needle back towards arrogance, or at least self-confidence, but to transcend it altogether by elevating self-awareness and acting from that still, conscious center. Cultivate the stillness and the awareness that emerges from it. Remain centered in yourself as far as you can at all times, and the whole nonsense of humility versus arrogance will cease to exist. Make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.